Dr. Akoury, thank you once again for being with us. And I know one of your main focal points at this time is addiction.
Yes, Jerry. Number one, thank you so much for coming today, and thank you so much for working very hard to bring to the attention very important topics, very important health topics that most everyone needs to know about. So yes, addiction is happening to be one of the major issues that I'm focusing on right now. I'm so happy that we're bringing this to the lights today.
Right. Well, I think that both of us are addicted
We
to
are.
getting information out, right? That's why we work on it nonstop. And there's many different kinds of addiction.
Absolutely.
Do you want to explain a little bit about what takes someone from having a drink to becoming an alcoholic? I know you have a thing with sexual addiction, a healthy libido versus an addiction, eating, enjoying food to overeating. Give us some insight.
You know, I want to make sure that I clarify one thing, and that is really we are meant to be on this planet and be able to survive. So we are equipped with all the tools for survivorship, okay? So we have two parts of the brain. One, the main part of the brain that deals with survivorship is the primitive brain, is the limbic system, okay? So the function of the limbic system is to ensure that I am able to survive. As we age, there is a new part to the brain that was added later on in the evolution, and that's called the neocortex. And that is the prefrontal cortex, which is the executive function of the brain, which tells us right from wrong. So if in times of pain, in times of chaos, in times of stress, in times of confusion, always the primitive brain will take over because it hijacks the entire brain because your main focus is to survive. Now there is, within the survivor system, there's something very important, and that is the limbic system. Okay, the limbic system, the job of it is to have different parts that helps us survive. One of them is the reward pathway. Okay, the reward pathway uses a certain chemical that is necessary for us to be able to continue survivorship, and that's dopamine. So anytime your well-being is attacked, you are at risk to have dopamine imbalances. Now, if I'm under a lot of pain, or fear, or stress, or concerns, I become dopamine deprived, which means all my neurotransmitters become deficient. So I have deficiency syndrome of the neurotransmitters, okay? So addiction is a deficiency syndrome, okay? Now, a lot of us are under a tremendous amount of stress. We live in an environment that is extremely stressful. A lot of social inequality, a lot of ethnical inequality, a lot of expectations that we are not used to. No more love, no more human touch. People are under a tremendous amount of pain. They don't know how to deal with it. They have nothing, they're void. They have nothing to fill them up. So they are always under attack. So they'll use the dopamine to a significant extent. How do you get your dopamine back? Is a reward system. So if you have some ways to increase your dopamine level, you run. You eat food that is healthy and rich in amino acid that helps you build your dopamine. But we're eating food that is void of everything. There's no L-tyrosine and magnesium and B vitamins that are necessary as cofactor to help you build up your dopamine stores. So you end up having to self-medicate. So a lot of these people self-medicate one way or the other. So they end up self-medicating on work, like you and me, because it gives us the drive. It gives us the feeling good. It's rewarding for me to work hard. But that's a workaholic. The problem is some of these addictions are socially accepted, and some of these addictions are not socially accepted. So if the addiction becomes a drug addiction, an substance use disorder, alcohol use disorder, sex disorder, or sexual addiction, or gambling, or you name it. Food is an addiction, but it's acceptable as an addiction. Then when it becomes a social stigma, then people start pointing fingers at these people. We're not helping them because these people have self-esteem issues. They have lots of problems, and we're having an epidemic. There's 1 in 3 people that now are suffering from addiction, or call it what you want to, substance use disorder, call it manic depression states that leads to substance use disorder, the extensive use of stimulants in babies. Now, I'm a pediatrician by training. When we had attention deficit disorder where I trained, we didn't have that many, number one. Number two, we did not use that many stimulants. Now, you have Adderall everywhere. A child who's 3, 4, 5 years old starts on Adderall, and then they become hyper, and then now you have to give them antidepressant. So our misuse of drugs for pain is causing a tremendous amount of dependency and substance dependency. So it's a multifactorial thing, and it has to be addressed. It has to come to life, because addiction actually causes death to many, many people because of different reasons. Why? Some of it could be because you develop cancer from just addiction. Because how does that happen? If you're an alcoholic, if you're drinking alcohol, you can develop throat cancer. So you're developing cancer. You can develop tongue cancer. You can develop GI cancer. You can develop liver cancer. So you smoke, it's an addiction too. Smoking is an addiction. So why is it important to bring this to light and stop the stigma? Is because the complications of addictions are huge. The consequences of substance use disorders or brain dysfunctions are huge. But we need to know, what is the real root cause for this? Is it just the food? Is it the upbringing? Is it the lack of love? Is it a genetic makeup? We got to really address this and pay attention to the suffering that is happening from addiction. So many wonderful actors died as a consequence of some kind of addiction.
Do you think that that's because society as a whole, we're not talking about acute pockets here and there, discriminate on what they're doing instead of looking at what caused it to happen?
We are a society that is evolving and changing. We're becoming more digital people. So human-to-human contact that was necessary for assurance of love. Hugging is not there. Comfort does not exist anymore. Love does not exist anymore. Respect does not exist anymore. The pain that happens from being demeaned and socially unacceptable puts it at a higher risk to use substances to self-medicate, to get to a normal state. So we are living in a society that is very, very unkind and very disrespectful of human life. because we are just so focused on ourselves.
How do you think it got there? And it happened in a pretty rapid fashion.
Yeah,
If you look at a timeline.
the digital evolution has minimized human contact. The second evolution is the food industry. It's the food revolution. We're giving you food that is void of all the amino acids or the food or the building block of all the neurotransmitters. So you are creating a group of people who don't have neurotransmitters. They need to survive, so they have to self-medicate at times. And then we're making drugs so much easier to access. Doctors prescribing tons of medications for pain when it could have been handled with natural ways, or warm compresses, or heat, or anti-inflammatory that are natural. They are freely prescribing narcotics at a rate that is beyond imagination. So we are causing some of this ourselves. So it's a huge problem, and it needs to be tackled in a very progressive way, in a very kind way, without stigma, allowing people to say, I have a problem. When they trust me, then I can help them. And substitution of one drug with another may not always be the answer. Anytime I treat a person with addiction, I address the whole being. You got to address your food. You got to make sure that you have enough of the proper minerals. You have enough of the proper amino acids, enough of the cofactors and the magnesium and the B vitamins and the niacin, all the food that are building block for the neurotransmitter. I also want to make sure that I don't eat inflammatory food. Some food inflames the brain. Inflammatory food causes neuroinflammation. Neuroinflammation causes what we call neuroinflammatory disorder and degenerations. So people have imbalances. And at times, the only way to fix these imbalances is to reach out for either a stimulant or a calmant. And now we're also becoming a quick fix society. We want everything fixed immediately.
Instant gratification.
Instant gratification.
And do you think that that's because of the lack of dopamine?
Well,
that you need more stimulant?
Well, we are lacking dopamine, that's for sure. But not only that, but the instant gratification is becoming important because now we have fostered that. Okay, you go to a doctor. Pain has a role in life. Pain helps you. A little small inflammation helps you deal with an infection. Masking pain may be a problem. So when you mask pain sometimes, it's always a good thing. So we are, I'm hurting. Help fix me right now. I'm sleeping. Give me a wake-up call. I mean, just give me a boost, you know. And that's what we're discussing about self-manipulation that is very dangerous, you know. You didn't sleep all night long, and then you boost up yourself with a tremendous amount of caffeine, and then nobody really considered that's an addiction. It's as addictive as everything else. And when does the addiction truly begin? When you're born, with sugar. Sugar addiction is the first addiction that we ever have. So,
well, they've done research and they've shown people on a lot of sugar, their brains are active like someone who's on cocaine.
Absolutely, because it works. It
you
uses the same receptors and use the same areas of the brain.
Do you see an increase in the amount of people being addicted to one thing or another in the last 30 years, or has it pretty much the same?
I believe it's beginning to become alarming. It's beginning to become more and more because we have a lot of factors that are influencing this. One of it is the ease with which you can obtain drugs. Most of the drugs you obtain are prescribed. And most of them, they're not even prescribed to you. There's a lot of drugs that are in the homes of different people, and there is no safety to these. So children, they help themselves to those, and they start selling to each other, and they don't really feel, because if it's prescribed, it's legal in their mind. So you start to be on these, you turn off your receptors, so you need more and more and more. So you have one problem, is that epidemic of overprescribing. You have a second problem, is an epidemic of food void of nutrients that are really brain-building nutrients. So you don't have the amino acids that are helping you to feel good, okay, to feel normal. So you need self-medication with stimulants. Now, you also do have food that's inflammatory. Gluten is extremely inflammatory to the gut and the brain. So you're eating inflammatory food that causes dysfunction at the brain level. Hidden infections cause neuroinflammatory degenerations. Lyme disease. Most people don't realize that when people have Lyme disorder, they can create imbalances in these nuclei in the brain that are involved in the reward pathways. So you have inflammation, you have infections, you have heavy metals, a lot of mercury. Most people don't realize there's a lot of mercury that we still are exposed to. So most people don't even realize the extent of environmental toxins on the brain. Now there's more and more studies that are showing the importance of a healthy bacterial flora in the body. So you have a lot of things that are creating neuroinflammatory disorders that predisposes us to self-medication of some sort. Now, so if we have a brain disorder, we need to feel better. So some people resort to drugs, and that we call the drug of choice. Some people resort to alcohol. Some people resort to smoking. Some people resort to sex. Some people resort to food, and some people work harder. And some people are the dopamine junkie. They like to just be in the space, or
they like the feeling.
That feeling, and then working hard is it just so many factors that need to be addressed that causes our brain to be on fire. And when the brain is on fire, it needs to be calmed down. And love does not exist. Stress is very high. So we have a lot of factors that causes all these dysfunction, from food to stress to overprescribing to ease of access to microbiota, flora that is dysfunctional, to social injustice. And when I say social injustice, it's not just being rich or poor. It's just injustice in general. I mean, I could be green, black, white, fat, small, heavy, French, Russia. It doesn't matter who I am. I am who I am. I've got to love me. I've got to accept me. People have to accept me for who I am.
What do you think there's an importance in being in an environment that's conducive to you? As far as what you're talking about, when you're talking about social injustice, if you're in an environment that's conducive to you, you'll be affected less by that.
Right.
Correct?
Right.
And as you know, we talked about this in another segment, bringing everybody together may not be the best thing because we're faced with so many different options, which may not be conducive to our life or their life.
But segregating,
so
if we segregate people too, it's just...
Well, it's not segregate. You know, there's a certain thing called self-segregation. You live in a neighborhood that's conducive to you. There are different types of neighborhoods. You're not going to pick a neighborhood, I would assume that you like to sleep at night and be quiet. So I wouldn't think that you would want to live in a neighborhood full of college kids who want to party all night. Okay?
Oh,
that's conducive to them.
This is a completely different thing. So you need to find a safe environment. And most of the people who have a safe environment, they can live in the Chinatown if they're Chinese. And some people like to be in, Little Italy or
Sure.
It's good because there's a sense of community, but it's wonderful, and that's what's missing, a sense of community, but it's not a sense of segregation, but a sense of community, which means that I have people who understand why I act this way. Like when I came from Egypt, even though I came from a very well-to-do makeup, which just happened to be that way. I really like who I am no matter what I am.
Right.
But I came from a makeup that was raised by Catholic nuns, where I had to really over-respect people, and that made people think at me as if I was crazy, because how would I, I see my professor, I say, hey, sir, and when all the other people say, hey, Rick, how are you? And he's going to be my professor. So I was the odd one, and it would have been nice if I had someone that made life a little easier for me, so that instead of being looked upon as if I'm stupid and crazy, but it was a good thing. I learned, but it's good to be within your environment. But if you're in your environment too much, you're not exposed. You're not open to other people. You have to be open. You have to respect everyone else. But would I want to be in an environment where there's so many drugs? No. So you choose your environment where you feel safe.
You self-segregate.
Oh,
to a certain degree. And when people say segregate, they automatically think race.
It doesn't
We're not
have to
talking
be
about race. We're talking about different wants and needs.
Right.
I like it into this. When I was in Europe working, Switzerland, there are certain areas of Switzerland that are pristine. It's like Disneyland times 3. It's spotless. People want to move there. They move there, let's say from the United States. They're miserable because there's so many laws. You can't have your grass too high. You have to have everything kept up. So they want that pristineness, but they don't want to have the laws imposed that it takes to do it. So once they loved what they seen, they want to become part of it, but it's not who they are. They want to have a lawnmower setting outside. They want a car with a tire off, and it's not acceptable there. So it creates tension. I know if I'm in certain areas, I tried to find a place to build my house that was conducive to who I am. And so if I live in an area that's not conducive to who I am, I'm going to be upset. By being upset, I've got stress. By being stressful, am I going to start self-medicating? I don't know. I don't think I would. I haven't been addicted to anything like that, but the likelihood would increase rapidly. And that's why I said with these forced pushing people together,
I'm not sure that
do you think that it causes that additional stress level? No. I know it wouldn't me. It does me. When I'm in different regions of the world, and I'm in a region where there's very high crime, I'm more tense. I'm looking over my shoulder. I'm looking around because something may happen, and it has happened in my life. There have been shootings around me and things like that. So I had to be aware. If I wasn't aware and my head was in the clouds, I might be dead. So it creates a tenseness in me. That tenseness, what you're talking about, there is a lack of dopamine to relax me, correct?
Well, so, you use a lot of dopamine when you're stressed because your dopamine becomes adrenaline. It's recycled into adrenaline, so you're losing your dopamine into a different pathway, right, which is the stress pathway.
Right.
So it steals away your dopamine.
When I was in Switzerland, I'd have my camera equipment. I slept with my door open. I didn't worry about it. There are certain places in the world I would no longer do that than the man on the moon, because I know someone's going to come in there and do some harm. So that stress level was completely down. And so therefore, my dopamine, when I'm saying the
well-being,
living inside the environment that's conducive to me, like I always say, like a polar bear, they're conducive living up in the Arctic. They're not going to be conducive living in Arizona. And
but this is a personal preference. What we need to talk about is that people.
Addiction.
But what I'm saying about when people feel a sense of community, mm-hmm, it's a good thing. So if you have the same religious makeup, it will make you feel good because people accept you. Now, you don't have to be from the same ethnic group, but it's just you're within a community that you feel comfortable within. Now, some communities are not the communities where I want to be part of, so I am at a stage in my life where I know a community does not, it's not a community where I belong. But you have a college student who comes from a very conservative family. You put him in college, and that, what would you tell him? How do you segregate him? How do you put him away from, you try, but some of it is going to be good for him because it's exposure, and some, again, is going to be freedom, and it's going to be some trial and error, and many of them would be okay, but a lot of them may not. A lot of drugs happen, and especially alcohol happen in a lot of doctors. The stress of being an anesthesiologist, for example, stress of being an ER physician at times, stress of being a lawyer, stress of being a politician, puts you at a risk where you have to self-medicate and increase your GABA level by getting a lot of alcohol, because GABA and alcohol are inhibitory to the brain. So you really, just understanding stress is a different thing, but understanding community is important. Now we don't have extended families anymore. So even if I live in a community that is not ethnic community that belongs to me, which...
Well, what I said before, what about ethnicity? It's about being around people who have the same, they share the same values of you.
That's it.
And so that has nothing to do with ethnicity.
Yeah, I'm just saying communities
right.
where you feel belonging. It's very important.
Like you don't turn your radio up too loud, they don't turn their radio up too loud, so that it doesn't
so
cross over.
You are in a community where there is balance,
right.
that makes harmony for you and for them. So most of us really live in these communities, but the thing is, some people have no choice. Some people have introductory jobs where they have to make ends meet, and I've been there, and I have to feed a family. So I understand how they feel. I had to really do things beyond me. And people, this was respecting me just because I'm a doctor from a foreign medical makeup. But I was strong enough that didn't affect me. But had I had the weakness to allow me to be, but I don't know, the support probably was because of the upbringing of love that I had. Maybe I had enough of it that made me love myself enough. But some of these young people don't have love in their life. They don't have role models. They come from families where there's no role models. So it's really a very complex disorder, but we need to address it one segment at a time. Like we need to address different parts of the alcohol mechanisms. Why are we becoming enslaved to something? Enslaved to alcohol, enslaved to drugs, enslaved to sex. It doesn't even give you joy anymore. So people who are enslaved to have sexual encounters on a regular basis with the wrong people but it's not always a pleasure. It becomes craving, it becomes withdrawal, it comes, they have a lot of shame. So these people are suffering. These people have pain. These people cannot come to the open and talk to us. These people are everywhere. So we need to allow them to speak. We need to allow them to have a voice. We need to allow them to understand that food could help them. We need to help them educate them. We need to help them coach them. We need to help them by coaching. We need to give them chances. We need to speak more about food that would help restoring the brain. We need to talk about eliminating toxic exposure, eliminating use of excessive use of hormones, like too much testosterone in an athlete can cause issues. Cortisol, steroids, people use. So it's not one thing. It's a spectrum of disorders. And the spectrum of disorder have one common, what I would say is root cause, is pain, is dissatisfaction, is poverty. Poverty at the brain level, not just poverty that's financial poverty, is food that is poor, food that is void. There's a lot of elements. We don't really talk. Now you're doing something amazing. We're talking to each other. Now we could have had a Google Hangout, or we could have talked over mail, which is a great thing. But that's what we do anymore. There's no human contact. There's no love.
The main thing you want to get across to people is there is help.
Absolutely.
and
There's help,
seek,
there's hope, there's healing.
and you can change and you can turn your life around.
You can. And you have to accept yourself and love yourself and forgive yourself.
Well, I'm looking forward to delving more into each segment
Oh, that would
later
be lovely.
on. But I'm glad we did this overview with you
Appreciate
about
it.
addiction. I know you're highly trained in this area
Appreciate that.
and that you love to share your information and help people.
That's my pleasure. I'm really happy that we share, and I want to help everybody. I want to help everyone to stop the suffering, stop the pain. So yes, I'm happy that we're here.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.